Soon, they arrived in front of the two quasi-supreme willpower experts. "Your Majesty," the two deities said respectfully. "You two, tell me what's going on with you," Zhou 11 asked. "Your Majesty," the Scarlet God Spirit expert said, "my name is Soki, and the quasi-supreme will next to me is Hanka. The two of us are members of the Holy Scale Treasure Hunt. The Holy Scale Treasure Hunting Team is a team formed by a Grade 4 Supreme God and a quasi-supreme willpower realm expert. There are a total of 16 members inside, of which 4 are quasi-supreme willpower experts and 12 are Grade 4 Supreme Gods. Hanka and I are vice captains of the Holy Scale Treasure Hunting Team. The main mission of our treasure hunting team is to search for the treasures left behind by him after his death on this willpower expert named Tianjun. For example, the crystallization of willpower that hasn't lost its power, or the various treasures hidden in his body, or even the inheritance he left behind. We have been searching for treasures here for more than 30,000 years. Recently, Hanka and I have been on a raiding mission. Rob the experts who wanted to enter Tianjun's corpse and rob of their belongings. And then, Soki looked carefully. I bumped into you, Your Majesty. Zhou 11 stroked his chin. So the owner of this corpse was called Tianjun, then, he asked. How many teams like yours are there in Tianjun's body? How many supreme gods are there? Are there any supreme willpower realm experts? Reporting. To Your Majesty, Soki said respectfully. Our team's strength is already considered top-notch in Tianjun's corpse. There are only about 100 teams like ours in the entire Tianjun's corpse. As for the number of supreme gods, there should be about 200,000. There are also supreme will powerhouses, but I don't know the exact number. I only know 2 at the moment. They are the supreme will of the sky and the supreme will of Xuanluo. They resided in the deepest part of Tianjun's corpse all year round. It was very rare to see the 2 of them appear. I've only seen the 2 of them once in a while after being here for a long time. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 nodded slightly with normal expressions. In fact, they were very surprised. 100,000 supreme gods. The number of supreme gods in the entire supreme great cosmos was currently only more than 10,000 supreme gods. The number of supreme gods present here was actually 20 times that of the supreme great cosmos. It was simply ridiculous. No wonder neither the supreme great cosmos nor the crimson great cosmos had the thought of taking this willpower corpse for themselves. He might shatter himself first with his strength, if he dared to clash head-on with him. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 were not surprised that there was a supreme willpower expert in Tianjun's corpse. This was a willpower expert after all. There might be a willpower inheritance in his corpse, so it was normal for him to attract a supreme willpower expert. Furthermore, there was a high chance that there were more than 2 supreme wills. It was very likely that there were more, but they did not appear in front of they. Do you have any Chaos Divine Treasures on you? Zhou 11 asked again. Chaos Divine Treasure. Soki looked confused. What's that? The True Blood Divine Stone. Hanka. Insert. True Blood Divine Stone? Zhou 11 raised his eyebrows. Yes, Your Majesty, Hanka said respectfully. The so-called True Blood Divine Stone is a drop of true blood from Tianjun's corpse. After removing excess impurities, it forms a pure-blooded blood, essence, also known as the True Blood Divine Stone. According to the Crimson Great Cosmos, where His Majesty is located, it can also be said to be a Chaos Divine Treasure. However, Your Majesty, the True Blood Divine Stone is almost useless to lone experts like us, who don't have the power of a lord. That's why none of us have a Chaos Divine Treasure. It does. Soki also hurriedly said, the True Blood Divine Stone is useless to us. If we forcefully refine the power inside, we might even become Tianjun's will puppets. Therefore, we might even take the initiative to abandon this thing. Zhou 11 nodded slightly. However, he was very excited. It doesn't matter if you run away like snakes or scorpions. Most importantly, he had finally confirmed that there were indeed Chaos Divine Treasures in Tianjun's corpse. Furthermore, from the looks of it, There should be quite a number of them. He had used it to upgrade his territory, not to refine the power inside. Therefore, he was naturally not like Soki and them, who had so many scruples. This Emperor came here to collect Chaos Divine treasures. When you encounter a Chaos Divine treasure in the future, you must leave it behind and pass it to this Emperor, Zhou 11 said. At your command, sire, your majesty. A new idea suddenly appeared in Soki's mind. He boldly said, You can completely subdue our Holy Scale treasure hunting team, and let our Holy Scale treasure hunting team help you find the Chaos Divine treasure, your majesty. Even though they is far inferior to your majesty, they are very familiar with the various passageways of Tianjun's corpse. With their help, His Majesty will definitely be able to obtain a large number of Chaos Divine treasures very quickly. Your Majesty, Soki is right, Hank hurriedly said. What do you guys have in mind? Zhou 11 asked with interest. This fellow really provided him with an idea. Why did he have to send people to excavate and collect Chaos Divine treasures? Wouldn't it be better to hire a group of people to help him search for Chaos Divine treasures? Moreover, Soki was right. Compared to them, these guys were indeed more familiar with the various passageways and environments of Tianjun's corpse. With their help, he would definitely be able to collect Chaos Divine treasures better and faster. Upon hearing Zhou 11's words, Soki and Hank immediately perked up and realized that their words had attracted His Majesty's attention. The two god spirits looked at each other and said seriously, Your Majesty, our thoughts are very simple. The experts moving around in Tianjun's corpse have always followed and agreed that the strong are respected, and the weak are prey to the strong. Your Majesty, all you need to do is to display power that far exceeds they and give them some benefits. Naturally, a large number of powerhouses will take the initiative to work for you. What do you need? Zhou 11 felt that what the other party said made sense and asked directly. Supreme God Crystal, Soki and Hank said, almost at the same time. Then, Soki continued, Your Majesty, you don't know. If we find any treasures in Tianjun's corpse and the news accidentally spreads, it will easily attract the covetous eyes of other enemies. Then, a large number of enemies will come to kill us and snatch the treasures. Therefore, in order to protect themselves and their treasures, the person who obtained the treasure could only squeeze out their potential and forcefully kill the enemy to escape. After 1 or 2 times, our divine spark origin could easily be emptied because of such a thing, causing us to become very weak. At this time, the Supreme God Crystal is the fastest and safest supplementary treasure that can allow us to quickly recover the origin power of our divine spark. Therefore, as long as they stayed in Tianjun's corpse for a little longer, all the gods would have Supreme God Crystals, because killing gods for treasures is too common in our place. We've been through more than 10,000 wars, big and small, on our own, and that's because we're quasi-supreme willpower powerhouses. If it were any other ordinary supreme god, they would have experienced at least 1 million battles of various sizes, and most of the god spirits in they have already perished in such a high-frequency and high-pressure combat environment. The ones who survived were all powerhouses, with both strength and luck. Zhou 11 clicked his tongue in wonder. It's so dangerous here. There are still so many supreme gods here, it's really tempting. Your Majesty is right. The idea of most supreme gods is to take advantage of this willpower expert and leave. However, the truth is that they will not think of retreating immediately after obtaining benefits. Instead, they will want more. Those who did not reap any benefits either perished later on, or they were unwilling to accept that they did not reap any benefits and had no choice but to brace themselves and continue to persevere here. Most of them did not have a good future. Soki said, Don't you guys lack supreme divine artifacts? Zhou 11 asked. No, most of the people here are supreme gods. After some of the existences of they perished, the supreme divine artifacts left behind have long given us a set of supreme divine artifacts each. Zhou 11 clicked his tongue in wonder. Zhou 11 clicked his tongue in wonder. This was the first time he had encountered a group of supreme gods who did not have much demand for supreme divine artifacts. Tianjun's corpse was indeed a treasure trove. It actually allowed the supreme gods to achieve the freedom of supreme divine artifacts. Come on. Take us to him, your captain. Let's start with your team, Zhou 11 said. Yes, your majesty, please come with me. Solon's expression was rather flattering and happy. It reminded Zhou 11 of a certain image. You were the one who lured the enemy here. Cough, cough. Zhou 11 shook his head and got rid of the unnecessary thoughts in his mind. Then they followed Soki and Hank all the way into a passage of Tianjun's corpse. The moment they stepped onto the surface of Tianjun's corpse, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 could not help but tremble. They looked at each other imperceptibly and saw each other's serious shock and ecstasy, because just now, just as they stepped on the corpse, the supreme unique Lord Talent, King of Treasures, which they had just upgraded this morning, began to remind they crazily. There was a treasure inside this Tianjun's corpse, and it contained countless treasures. Relying on the King of Treasures' powerful senses, Zhou 11 and Zhou Sheer could sense that the lowest grade of these treasures were Master God tier level treasures. As for the highest level treasure, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 looked at the deepest part of Tianjun's body, which was his brain. They could sense it. In the brain of Tianjun's corpse, there was a treasure with extremely shocking luck. That treasure was like a majestic and scorching sun, emitting a resplendent light that illuminated the myriad worlds. Although other treasures were also very precious, in front of that treasure, they were like fireflies in the vast sun. The difference was so great that they could not be compared at all. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 even had an illusion. This mysterious treasure was even more precious than the reality cube controlled by them. Could this be an eternal immortal realm treasure? Thinking of this, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12's hearts could not help but pound. That was an eternal immortal realm treasure. Treasures that could only be used by true peak experts on the path of cultivation. If it was really a treasure of this level, it would be enough to make countless supreme willpower elites and even willpower elites go crazy. What do you think? Zhou 11 asked Zhou 12 as he walked behind Soki. The location of the treasure has never been moved. I reckon that this treasure has never been discovered by other experts, so we don't have to be anxious. Since this treasure can stay here for so long without being discovered, it won't be discovered in the near future. With his personality, he wouldn't allow us to act rashly. Let's get a feel for what's going on here before we go any further, Zhou 12 said. Okay. Zhou 11 nodded. A moment later, under Soki's lead, they arrived at a rather spacious secret base. This secret base was located in Tianjun's corpse. It was a natural hole in his body. The 14 god spirits were resting here. At first, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 were puzzled as to why they did not create their own world for them to rest and cultivate. Why did they have to squeeze together like this? But soon, they knew why. This was because they could clearly sense that their supreme divine power was greatly suppressed in the Tianjun corpse's body. Ordinary supreme gods and quasi-supreme in willpower elites not only found it extremely difficult to open up worlds, but it was also very difficult to even open up domains. However, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 were naturally not ordinary supreme gods. After they used King, their strength immediately reached a level that was extremely close to a supreme willpower realm expert. With such powerful strength, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 could feel that they could expend more divine power to open up the world and use the nomological domain. This was naturally good news for them. This widened the gap in strength between them and the other supreme gods after all. Right at that moment, a quasi-supreme willpower practitioner stood up and narrowed his eyes at Zhou 11, Zhou 12, and the other supreme gods and ordinary god spirits behind Soki and Hank. The strong premonition from a quasi-supreme willpower practitioner made him realize that Zhou 11 and the other god spirits were up to no good. Soki, Hank, what do you mean by rashly bringing other unfamiliar god spirits to our base? He asked. Soki and Hank did not answer him. Instead, they looked at Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 and respectfully said, Your Majesty, he is the captain of our Holy Scale treasure hunting team. The other party is called God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. He comes from a universe called Holy Scale. As he spoke, God Lord Spirit Dragon's expression gradually turned ugly. Hello, everyone. Zhou 11 walked out and smiled at the 14 god spirits present. This emperor only wants to say one thing. All the god spirits present, including the God Lord Larva, are trash. If you're not convinced, let's fight, he said arrogantly. Following the law of the jungle, right? Then I'll show you what a true expert is. The corners of Zhou 12's mouth twitched when he saw this scene. He finally knew what clone Zhou 11's clone was. Zhang Yang's character duplicate, or rather, his arrogant character duplicate. Only such a clone could do such a brainless thing. However, it had to be said that while such a move was brainless, the effect was quite obvious. He could clearly see that many of the god spirits present, especially God Lord Holy Scale Spirit, Dragon, were clearly a little warm. However, the other gods, other than the God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon, didn't do anything drastic. They had already seen that there were many supreme gods and master god tiers behind Zhou 11 after all. Soki and Hank, coupled with the two quasi-supreme willpower experts, were the one who would gain the upper hand in a fight between. They might not necessarily be the one. Therefore, they looked at God, Lord Holy Scale, Spirit Dragon. As the leader of the Holy Scale treasure hunting team, his duty was to stand up for them in times of crisis, in addition to taking the lead in treasure hunting. Otherwise, who would recognize him as their captain? Sure enough, the God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon stood out with a dark expression. What do you mean? Zhou 11 grinned. He scratched his ears and said arrogantly, Are you deaf from what this emperor just said? This emperor never repeats what he said. Since you're deaf, this emperor will beat you until you understand. Zhou 11 swung his sword. An extremely terrifying 9-colored sword energy burst forth and enveloped God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon's expression changed. He felt a fatal sense of danger above. This terrifying 9-colored sword aura. He had not felt such a feeling for a long time as a top-notch, quasi-supreme willpower expert. He felt it in front of those supreme will realm cultivators in the few times he felt it. Could this fellow in front of him be a supreme will realm expert? No, impossible. How could a true supreme willpower realm expert say so much nonsense to him? There was no time to think. The God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon immediately activated his divine power. A grey scale appeared between his brows. Primordial aura filled the entire space as soon as the grey scale appeared. When the gods and spirits saw God, Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon use this move, they were all shocked. This was because they knew that this was God Lord Holy Scale, Spirit Dragon's strongest trump card. He would only use this move when he encountered an evenly matched or irresistible enemy. Unexpectedly, this unfamiliar supreme god actually forced God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon to use his ultimate move as soon as he attacked. Unbelievable. At this moment, the grey scale immediately emitted a grey pillar of light that pounced at Zhou 11. Attack what he needed to save. The God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon knew that there was a high chance that he would not be able to block this sword aura, so he chose not to block it and directly attacked the owner of the sword aura. According to his expectations, this fellow who called himself this emperor would definitely withdraw his power to protect himself and dissipate the incoming sword aura. At that time, his danger would naturally be resolved. However, Zhou 11 calmly looked at the incoming grey light pillar and did not move at all. The God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon felt a sense of doubt and urgency, seeing that the grey pillar of light was getting closer and closer to Zhou 11. Why didn't this guy dodge? Could he have felt that he could withstand his nomological skills? His nomological skills carried the power of corruption and corrosion. Once it was contaminated by this power, it would quickly decay and corrode the divine spark and divine body of the person who was contaminated. Furthermore, it was extremely difficult to remove. Could he not tell? There was no time to think because the sword light that Zhou 11 shot out was already right in front of him. Furthermore, he did not retract the power on the sword in light and let it disintegrate on its own. This left he with no choice but to dodge first. However, he quickly discovered something. He couldn't escape. The sword beam seemed to have locked onto him. No matter how he flew, teleported or used other dodging methods, the sword beam seemed to be fixed in front of him, as it advanced at a stable and terrifying speed. At this last moment, realizing that he could not dodge the attack, God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon could only activate all his divine power and defensive methods. He did not even hesitate to activate the origin divine power in his divine spark to block this attack. The next second, this 9-colored swordlight seemed to be unaffected by all techniques. It broke through all the defensive methods that God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon had released with all his might and pierced into his glabella. Crack, crack, crack. At this moment, the gods seemed to have heard the sound of something shattering. When they saw God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon again, they saw that God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon, who had always been strong, was already stunned on the spot. Then, the aura on his body quickly dissipated. In less than a few seconds, the aura on his body completely disappeared. Finally, he fell to the ground with a bang. He stared at Zhou 11. It was as if he wanted to see how Zhou 11 would deal with his attack even if he died. He soon saw it. When the grey pillar of light released by him was a meter away from Zhou 11, it suddenly stopped in the air as if time had stopped. Then, the grey pillar of light automatically disintegrated into countless grey weapons and disappeared before the eyes of the deities. God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon's eyes widened slightly. Then, he discovered something that made he despair. He could not understand. He couldn't understand how the other party had eliminated his full-strength attack. The God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon was completely dead with this sense of despair and doubt. Silence! The entire Sacred Scale treasure hunting team's resting area fell silent. They stared wide-eyed at God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon's corpse. They never expected that their captain would die so quickly in his hands. This was a top-notch, quasi-supreme willpower realm expert. He could be considered an expert even among the quasi-supreme will realm experts. Otherwise, he wouldn't have surpassed the other 3 quasi-supreme willpower experts to become the team leader and even use the Holy Scale as the team's name. He relied on his invincible strength. However, this invincible strength actually seemed so weak in front of the expert called His Majesty. God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon had died with just 1 strike, while he was safe and sound, as if nothing had happened. What kind of terrifying strength was this? Even the top supreme willpower realm powerhouses probably did not have such strength, right? It was likely that even people would believe that he was a true supreme willpower realm expert with such means and suppression. This captain of yours seems pathetically weak. Zhou 11 grinned. His arrogant and domineering aura was revealed as he said this. None of the gods present said a word. They, who believed that the strong were respected, had completely conquered they when Zhou 11 easily killed God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. They did not even have any dissatisfaction in their hearts. Powerful, especially his unquestionable strength. It was a super trait that could completely subdue enemies and opponents, and they was undoubtedly convinced by this trait. Zhou 11 looked at Soki. Soki immediately understood and stood up. He raised his head proudly. Do you know how powerful His Majesty is? From now on, His Majesty will be the leader of this Sacred Scale treasure hunting team. Your Majesty, what name do you have in mind? Soki suddenly turned to ask Zhou 11. Zhou 11 didn't expect to encounter such a small problem of naming. However, he had to change the name. He thought about it and casually said, "Let's call it the Chaos Treasure Hunting Team." He had the Chaos human bloodline and was stepping on the corpse of a chaotic divine demon. It was reasonable for him to form a Chaos Treasure Hunting Team. Okay. Hearing this, Soki immediately turned to these supreme gods and another quasi-supreme willpower realm expert and raised his head. From now on, our treasure hunting team will be called the Chaos Treasure Hunting Team. Why don't you greet your new captain and future king? Greetings, Your Majesty. X-13. The god spirits looked at each other and quickly accepted the reality. They immediately said in unison. They did not look disappointed. after accepting the change in their identities. Instead, they looked excited. They were very direct in their thinking as top-notch experts. If you're strong and can bring us more benefits, we'll follow you. If you're weak, then get the hell out of here. The powerhouse they had previously acknowledged was God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon, and now the king that they acknowledged was clearly stronger than God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. If nothing went wrong, he would naturally bring they more benefits. Therefore, they was naturally filled with anticipation for the future. When Zhou 11 saw that he had achieved the effect of establishing his dominance, he no longer maintained his arrogant and despotic face. Instead, he smiled faintly. Since everyone has acknowledged me as their captain, this emperor naturally won't mistreat you. Take this as a small greeting gift. I hope that we can work together in the future and obtain more wealth from Yanjun's corpse. After saying that, Zhou 11 waved his right hand, and a total of 15 world rings flew in front of the god spirits present. When one of the god spirits opened it, they were immediately shocked and delighted to discover that the world rings in front of they contained a total of 10,000 Grade 1 Supreme God Divine Crystals. Thank you, Your Majesty. The fine Supreme Gods were pleasantly surprised and respectful. And among them, Soki and Hank's voices were especially loyal and loud. This was because they discovered that even though there were also 10,000 Supreme God Divine Crystals in their world rings, they were not Grade 1 Supreme God Divine Crystals, but Grade 2 Supreme God Divine Crystals. If converted into Grade 1 Supreme God Divine Crystals, it would be a total of 100,000 Grade 1 Supreme God Divine Crystals. These 10,000 Grade 2 Supreme God Divine Crystals were enough for them to experience many life and death crises. How could they not be surprised? His Majesty was really a generous expert. All the Supreme Gods present had the same thought. Zhou 11 smiled faintly and nodded. Now that the effect of establishing his might have been achieved, the next step was naturally the reward segment. There were benefits to having dignity. Only then could his subordinates properly work for him. He naturally understood such matters. Next, it was time to make a request. Thinking of this, he slowly said, "This emperor only needs one treasure this time. That's the Chaos Divine Treasure, which is what you call the True Blood Divine Stone. In the following exploration, you need to find enough True Blood Divine Stones for me. For every unit of True Blood Divine Stone, this emperor can spend 100 units of Grade 1 Supreme God Crystals to purchase it. This emperor will buy however many you have. This emperor doesn't need any other treasures you've collected. During this process other than the True Blood Divine Stone, you can keep them for yourselves." All the Supreme Gods, including the quasi-Supreme Willpower Practitioner, widened their eyes and looked at Zhou 11 as if they were confirming whether Zhou 11 was telling the truth as soon as he said. Even Soki and Hank could not help but look at Zhou 11. "Your Majesty, is what you say true?" A Grade 4 Supreme God could not help but ask. The other Supreme Gods also looked at Zhou 11, longing for his answer. "This emperor is a man of his word," Zhou 11 said in a deep voice. He didn't care about other treasures. He and Zhou Shier's goal for this trip was very clear. It was to obtain the Chaos Divine Treasure. Other than the Chaos Divine Treasure, the other treasures were not important to them. They would get it if they could. If they couldn't get Zhou 11, they wouldn't. Feel that it was a pity. After all, with the various lord talents of the main body, there was bound to be no shortage of treasures in the future. Therefore, Zhou 11 and Zhou Shier would not be bewitched by so many treasures here. They would only focus on the Chaos Divine Treasure. When the gods heard this, they immediately became excited. The candidate for the captain position, as a powerhouse who protected them, usually needed to share the treasures they had obtained during their treasure exploration. The distribution ratio was as low as 20% and as high as 50%. For example, God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. When he was the captain, he required his team members to hand over 40% of the treasures. This was already an extremely high percentage. However, in the end, the gods accepted the ratio. The reason was simple. That was, they needed the protection of God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon, and God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon did indeed have enough strength to protect they in Tianjun's corpse to survive and search for treasures. Even though this percentage was very high, they still chose to grit their teeth and accept it because of these two reasons. They originally thought that with Zhou 11 becoming the new captain of the Chaos Treasure Hunting Team, he would definitely ask for a higher percentage of the profits. It might even reach 50%. Zhou 11 was much stronger than God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon after all. It was not surprising for such an expert to ask for a higher price. Some treasure hunting teams might even take the initiative to offer a higher percentage of the profits to keep such a powerhouse to protect them in order to obtain the protection of such a powerhouse. However, they never expected that the new captain in front of them would not want any benefits other than the most worthless and unwanted true blood divine stone. If this isn't a surprise, what is it? This is like a pie falling from the sky. They now felt like they had been hit by a pie. Zhou 11 leisurely said while the gods were still in shock. In the future, when you search for true blood, divine stones, you can rope in other lone god spirits, or god spirits with small teams to come to us and collect true blood divine stones. For this emperor, their treatment is the same. As long as I can speed up the collection of the true blood divine stones, this emperor will definitely not be stingy with the rewards. Supreme divine artifacts, divine crystals, secret techniques, inheritance. This emperor has everything. As for the consequences, as long as you don't provoke a Supreme Will Realm expert, experts below the Supreme Will Realm are all ants to this emperor. So feel free to do whatever you want. Yes, Your Majesty. All the Supreme Gods agreed. They were all aware of His Majesty's strength, so they naturally knew that His Majesty was telling the truth. With His Majesty's strength, he could indeed act almost unscrupulously among experts below the Supreme Will Realm. With His Majesty as their backer, they could indeed do things for His Majesty without worrying too much. Zhou 11 nodded and said, "Go. Come back and tell this emperor if you encounter any irresistible trouble. This emperor will naturally send experts to help you resolve the trouble. But remember, don't come to this emperor for every small matter. This emperor doesn't have much patience," he said lightly, "at your command, sire." The Supreme God's hearts trembled. They glanced at God Lord Yulong's corpse, which had yet to lose its temperature and could not help but feel a sense of fear. His Majesty was indeed impatient. God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon was a top-notch quasi-supreme willpower practitioner, but he was still beaten to death by His Majesty. He did not even have the time to beg for mercy. They made up their minds thinking of this. Even if they had the backing of a top-notch expert like His Majesty, they would not casually stir up trouble and get themselves into trouble. Otherwise, when the time comes, if he did not obtain any benefits, he might end up like God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. This was a huge opportunity. He could not afford to screw it up because of a moment of foolishness and arrogance. Following that, they did not waste any time and immediately left the resting area to search for the true blood divine stone. Now, to they, time, was the true blood divine stone. The true blood divine stone represented more Supreme God crystals, and more Supreme God crystals meant that they could experience more life and death battles in the land of the heavenly handsome zombie god spirits and obtain more treasures. They did not want to waste their time resting after they left. Zhou 11 turned to look at Zhou 12 with a smug expression. "What do you think? I did a good job, didn't I?" So. However, Zhou 12's expression was very calm. "Next, let's do what we should do." Zhou 11 nodded. They looked at each other and saw the passion in each other's eyes. Now the task of collecting the Chaos Divine treasures had been arranged. Then they could use the Lord talent of the King of Treasures to focus on collecting the treasures hidden in Tianjun's corpse. They didn't expect it either. Originally, they had planned to collect the Chaos Divine treasures themselves. They were doing it instead. However, plans can't keep up with changes. Zhou 11 and them did not care. As long as he could gather enough Chaos Divine treasures, it would be fine. Comparatively, the current job was more interesting. Then let's go. At Zhou 11's command, he left with the entire Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's Supreme Gods, Master God Tiers, and Soki and Hank, who he had just subdued to search for treasures. Soon, they arrived at the location of the first treasure spot. This was the location of a godless passage. Zhou 11 and they could clearly see that there were many traces of mining here. However, it seemed that it was because of the excessive mining that this place was considered a barren land without any treasures. As a result, it was neglected until now. But Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 relied on the King of Treasures' senses to confirm that there were indeed treasures here, and there was more than one, right there. Zhou 11 pointed at a wall and said to the gods behind him, "Start digging deeper with the point this emperor pointed at." "Yes, your majesty." All the supreme gods and master god tiers of the blazing sun divine kingdom immediately responded and immediately began to dig. All the supreme gods and master god tiers of the blazing sun divine kingdom immediately responded and immediately began to dig. This was the place where Tianjun's corpse was, after all. Ordinary pickaxes, even those with extraordinary power, could not damage this place at all. Only the willpower of a master god tier level had the right to destroy the walls here. Only the willpower of a supreme god could quickly destroy the wall and obtain the treasures inside. As for the supreme will realm, they could already go deep into the head of Tianjun's corpse and search for the most important treasures and inheritance of Tianjun's corpse. While Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 envied the top experts for being able to find the most precious treasures and legacies, they wouldn't care too much about these things. Doing what they could do was what they should do now. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 knew this very well. Next, the master god tiers and supreme gods all used their law skills to attack the wall in front of them. It's called a wall, however, it was actually the body of Tianjun's willpower. After he died, even though his body of will had become much weaker, it was not something that ordinary god spirits could break. The master god tiers and supreme gods tried their best to throw their law skills at the wall, but they only destroyed a small portion. When they saw this, they couldn't help but sigh at the powerhouses with strong willpower. It had been so many years since the death of this powerhouse. Logically speaking, his body strength should have dissipated by now. It would only be normal if his body strength had greatly decreased. However, even if it was a huge drop, it was not something that the gods and spirits could break easily. This was something that they did not expect. And among the gods, Soki and Hank, who had just joined, looked at each other in confusion. They did not know about this place either. It was just an abandoned passageway that had been plundered and mined countless times. There was definitely no treasure left. Why did His Majesty spend so much effort in this place? They was puzzled, but they did not dare to ask further. At the same time, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 were not in a hurry when they saw how inefficient it was. However, they did not stay idle. Instead, they joined they and attacked the wall together. With the addition of Zhou 11 and Zhou 12, two top-notch quasi-supreme willpower experts, the efficiency of the gods' attack had clearly increased. In less than 15 minutes, the wall in front of them had been penetrated more than 10 meters deep by them. At this moment, more than 10 beams of light suddenly appeared in the deepest part of the passageway, illuminating the entire passageway. The eyes of the blazing sun divine kingdom's gods lit up, but that was all. They were all veterans of the blazing sun divine kingdom. They had seen countless treasures, so they naturally wouldn't have much of a reaction to the treasure light. However, Soki and Hank widened their eyes. There was actually a treasure in this abandoned passageway? And there was more than one. At the thought of this, when they looked at Zhou 11 again, they immediately felt that the king they followed had become even more mysterious. His Majesty really has an unbelievable ability that they doesn't understand. Take it out. Zhou 11's reaction was normal, as he said calmly, "A supreme god of the blazing sun. Divine Kingdom immediately jumped into the passageway and took out all the treasures inside, presenting them to Zhou 11 and Zhou 12. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 looked over. A total of 11 treasures floated quietly in front of they, each of them emitting energy fluctuations at the level of a grade 4 supreme god. Among them, there were supreme divine artifacts, divine medicines, minerals, Grade 4 Supreme God level nomological inheritances, Book of the God Spirit, and so on. To think that so many different kinds of treasures could be nurtured in the body of a willpower practitioner. The will of such an expert is truly mystical, Zhou 11 sighed. Transcendence of will. It was a truly unimaginable cultivation realm, laws, willpower. These two concepts could not restrain such an expert. They were existences that truly surpassed all cultivation systems. It was also because of this. Only those with strong willpower could do whatever they wanted in the ultimate void cosmos without worrying about encountering any danger, because no matter which cultivation system it was, no one could restrict such an expert. They were still cultivating in the system, while the strong-willed ones had truly transcended everything and were no longer bound by any cultivation system. Therefore, the creatures of the ultimate void universe had a very appropriate description for these experts. Lawless. It showed how powerful and terrifying a willpower-strong practitioner was to be able to use the word lawless to describe a willpower-strong practitioner, and this description was recognized by the various universes in the ultimate void great cosmos. Zhou 11 did not think too much about it. He took a look and put these treasures into the #1 treasure vault. Happy. He must be happy. These were all grade 4 Supreme God treasures after all. There were not many Supreme God treasures of this level, even in his first treasure vault. However, it was not to the extent that he couldn't be happy. The only treasures that could make Zhou Zhou and his clones excited were Supreme Willpower treasures, Willpower Chu treasures, and even Eternal Immortal Realm treasures. There was a high chance that these treasures existed in Tianjun's corpse. Zhou 11 naturally did not expect to obtain that treasure that might be at the Eternal Immortal Realm. However, Zhou 11 felt that with the help of the King of Treasures, Imos and Zhou 12 should be able to obtain a few supreme treasures and treasures. When the time came, the main body's ability to protect itself must be even stronger. Go on. Zhou 11 did not stop and continued to follow the King of Treasures' directions to the next treasure location. Soon, they came to the next treasure hunting spot. Huh? Zhou 11 looked at the chaotic divine demon that was emitting the aura of a rank 4 supreme god and was elated. There are still living chaotic divine demons here. But he doesn't seem to be in a good state. Zhou 11 looked at him carefully. Judging from the bloodline aura emanating from the other party's body, he was undoubtedly a chaotic divine demon. Judging from the bloodline aura emanating from the other party's body, he was undoubtedly a chaotic divine demon. The next moment, the chaotic divine demon pounced at Zhou 11. When Zhou 11 saw this scene, there was only one thought left in his mind. This guy is crazy. No matter how strong this guy was, he was only a grade 4 supreme god. How did he have the guts to charge at they and the other supreme gods and master god tiers? On the surface, they had two quasi-supreme willpower experts. There was no need for Zhou 11 to do anything. Hank took the initiative to step forward. Law skills belonging to the law of strength erupted, and a circle destroyed this guy's. And even the divine spark inside was shattered into pieces. Zhou 11 raised his hand and retrieved the other party's spoils of war. Soon, a large number of spoils of war appeared in his first treasure vault, and the chaotic divine demon's corpse in front of his disappeared without a trace. Zhou 11 looked at the loots, ignored the other treasures, and directly landed on the chaos divine treasure. Then his face lit up. This was because he saw that this chaos divine demon, a 4th grade supreme god, had actually dropped a total of 200 chaos divine treasures under the enhancement of his lord. Talent and various titles. Great, it was a good start! And Zhou 11 was elated. Zhou 12 could sense Zhou 11's thoughts, and a smile appeared on his face. He had not obtained many treasures, but he had already obtained 200 units of chaos divine treasures. What a pleasant surprise. In addition, this fellow was indeed worthy of being a grade 4 supreme god chaos divine treasure. The chaos divine treasure that dropped was actually 50 times more valuable than the chaos divine demon that was master. God tier advance grade. It was the right place to come. They even had a feeling they could collect all the chaos divine treasures that were enough to upgrade their territory with just Tianjun's corpse. In fact, The excess Chaos Divine treasures could be used to nurture other Lord factions to advance to the Master God tier kingdom, and help him meet the advancement conditions to advance to the Lord faction of the high-level Master God tier kingdom. I didn't expect to meet a demon of chaos. Right at that moment, Soki said in surprise. Demon of chaos? What's that? Zhou 11 asked. Wasn't he a chaotic divine demon? Your Majesty, Soki said respectfully. The so-called chaos demons are the demonic creatures controlled by the true blood divine stone after some normal god spirits forcibly devoured and refined the true blood divine stone in Tianjun's corpse. They lost their will because they couldn't resist the invasion of the true blood divine stone. Because its body has also been transformed into a chaotic divine demon, we call it the chaotic demon. These demons of chaos are distributed among Tianjun's corpse, and most of them appear and disappear unpredictably. I didn't expect to encounter such a monster so quickly. Zhou 11 raised his eyebrows. Since the true blood divine stone has such a huge problem, why did it give birth to so many chaotic demons? Could it be that a god spirit forcefully created chaotic demons? Not really. Soki sighed and said, It's just that there's indeed a 1% chance that a god spirit can resist the invasion of the power in the true blood divine stone and thus refine the true blood divine stone, increasing their strength greatly. The other god spirits couldn't resist the temptation and tried to take the initiative to refine it. In the end, most of them became chaotic demons. Everyone thinks they're the god of destiny protected by great fortune. In the end, most of them became the walking dead. It's pathetic. I see. Zhou 11 understood. That's true. That was a true blood divine stone left behind after the death of a strong willpower practitioner after all. Other than strong willpower practitioners and stronger practitioners, most god spirits would probably not be able to resist this temptation. Even an expert at the supreme will realm would not be an exception. Compared to weaker gods, supreme willpower powerhouses might even desire the power of willpower more after all. As for the risk was nothing to those experts who yearned for strength compared to the benefits of obtaining strength. Zhou 11 had seen too many examples of people taking risks for the sake of power. Therefore, he wasn't surprised at all. Moreover, it was just as Soki said. Many god spirits, especially those who had reached the level of Master God tier, or even Supreme God, believed that they had great luck. In fact, it was. Without great luck, who could rely on their own hard work to reach the level of Master God tier and Supreme God step by step? Maybe there were, but very few of them. And if they felt that they had great providence, it was very likely that they would feel that they would be the lucky one in 100. However, reality was often cruel. Creatures who believed themselves to be the lucky ones would often not be blessed by him. Luck mostly favored those who were prepared. As a result, a large number of chaos demons appeared in Tianjun's corpse. This group of pitiful experts who firmly believed in heaven's will but were toyed with by it. Zhou 11 believed that his main body was also an expert blessed with great luck. However, he was unwilling to take the risk of absorbing the true blood divine stone. This was the true blood left behind by a willpower existence. How careless was he to absorb such a thing without investigating anything? Who knew how many tricks there were in this thing? Even if the Supreme Will and the Crimson Overlord came together, they might not be able to see through the techniques of a willpower expert, let alone a little army like his. He should just treat this thing as a material for upgrading his territory. As for other uses, he should keep a respectful distance. In any case, he was not in a hurry to increase his strength. There was no need to take the risk of using such a hidden danger. Come on, continue searching for treasures. Zhou 11 did not think much of it and continued to search for treasures. The rest of the journey, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 had obtained many grade 4 Supreme God-level treasures. As for treasures below or above grade 3 Supreme God level, they had yet to discover them. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 could not help but sigh. Tianjun was indeed a strong willpower practitioner. even though he had been dead for such a long time. He was still so generous. He was even unwilling to condense a treasure below the level of a grade 4 supreme god. On the way to the treasure hunt, they also encountered 3 to 4 chaotic divine demons. Just as Soki had said, they were indeed distributed among Tianjun's corpse. They rarely gathered together, and most of them wandered alone. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 naturally had nothing to say in the face of such moving chaos divine treasures. They directly destroyed them and extracted the chaos divine treasures in the other party's body. In less than half a day, they had collected more than 1,000 units of chaos divine treasures. This made Zhou 11 and Zhou 12's exclamation worthwhile. They did not care much about the grade 4 supreme god level treasures. At the same time, at the ultimate void battlefield, in the Demon Lord Sanctuary, the Lord of 10,000 Evils and his 1,000 Evils army were standing respectfully behind a figure that emitted boundless holy light. This figure was none other than the Supreme Will. "Lord Supreme Will, may I ask when we leave?" The Lord of 10,000 Evils said respectfully. "Let's wait a little longer. The Void Emperor is also gathering his forces. It will be the time for a head-on battle when they are assembled," the Supreme Will reminded. "Yes, my lord." The Lord of 10,000 Evils nodded calmly. At their level, any schemes were useless. It was fine if both sides did not fight, but if they fought, it would be a battle of absolute strength. So the Supreme Will didn't mind waiting a little longer. The Lord of 10,000 Evils also understood this, so he didn't feel that something was wrong. However, after some hesitation, he couldn't help but ask, "Is Lord Crimson, Overlord not coming?" However, after some hesitation, he couldn't help but ask, "Is Lord Crimson, Overlord not coming?" "But you don't have to worry. It's just a Void Emperor. I can handle it," the Supreme Will said. His tone was very natural and calm, as if it was a matter of course. "I've never been worried about such things. It's just that I want to ask you for a favor, Your Excellency. I hope the Supreme Will approve," the Lord of 10,000 Evils said respectfully. "Oh?" The Supreme Will looked at the Lord of 10,000 Evils with a faint smile and nodded. "All right. You have contributed to the ultimate void battlefield, so I should reward you. Tell me, what are your requests?" "After His Majesty defeats the Void Emperor, I would like to search the sanctuary for the ultimate void crystal and chaos divine treasure," the Lord of 10,000 Evils said. "Ultimate void crystal and chaos divine treasure? Are you upgrading your territory too? But didn't you stop running your territory a long time ago and specialize in law cultivation? What? Do you have other thoughts, seeing the common people's regal strength increase so quickly too?" The Supreme Will was a little surprised. Then he smiled and said, "I asked for it for your sake. Brother Common People's blazing sun. Divine Kingdom needs to be promoted to a high-level Divine Kingdom Lord faction. Currently, it lacks chaos divine treasures and ultimate void crystals. Therefore I mustered my courage and asked for these 2 things from you," the Lord of 10,000 Evils said honestly. He knew that he could not lie in front of the Supreme Will, so he could only tell the truth. He felt that since the Supreme Will valued his elder brother so much, he probably wouldn't mind such a small matter. "I didn't expect you to have such a deep friendship with the common people's regal. In that case, you can take it when the time comes. These things don't work for me anyway," the Supreme Will said casually. He felt somewhat gratified. He was naturally very happy to see that 2 of the 4 successors he approved of having such a mutually beneficial friendship. Before the common people's regal, the God King Heaven Punishment, the Lord of 10,000 Evils, and the Lord of 10,000 Evils had always regarded each other as competitors. They had never formed any friendship and would have a mutual appreciation between competitors at best. Even though the Supreme Will was happy to see such a scene, he actually felt a little uncomfortable when they were competing with each other for the position of Supreme Lord. However, this was the way to compete for the Supreme Lord position. The victor was a noble, and the loser was a bandit. This was something that they had to experience. The common people's regal unexpectedly actually caused a wonderful change in the competitive relationship between them after he joined. This proved that the common people's regal had a unique charm of an emperor. However, wasn't this also proof of his strength? A hint of joy appeared on Lord of 10,000 Evil's face after hearing the Supreme Will's words. "Thank you, Lord Supreme Will," the Lord of 10,000 Evils said happily. The Supreme Will nodded, then said, "When the battle begins, later, pay attention to protecting yourself. This decisive battle determines whether the Ultimate Void clan can continue to stay in the Ultimate Void battleground. He might attack a junior like you to vent his anger if the other party realizes that he can't stay. Don't let that get you killed, as you command." The Lord of 10,000 Evil's expression turned solemn. As he immediately said respectfully, the Supreme Will nodded. Then he looked into the distance a moment later. His gaze suddenly focused. A majestic figure flew over rapidly from afar. In less than a moment, he arrived about 100,000 light-years away from the Supreme Will and Lord of 10,000 Evils. This position was just a matter of a thought. To a Supreme Will Realm expert, not to mention the Supreme Will and Void Sovereign, there was little difference between the two sides now. The Supreme Will. The Void Emperor said coldly, "I didn't expect that I would have to fight you in. The end? I wasn't going to fight you so soon. Unexpectedly, the plan is not as good as the change. The common people's regal under your command is really good. Where's him? Maybe he is scared and doesn't dare to come." Hearing that, the Supreme Will laughed. That moment of peerless beauty caused Lord of 10,000 Evils to be slightly dazed. Then he came back to his senses and hurriedly retracted his gaze. The Great Void Emperor actually used a provocative technique on a junior. "It seems you really think you've lost a lot of face with my successor, which is why you're saying this. Void Emperor, you're getting worse. Don't worry. My successor is a smart person. He predicted that you would be exasperated and take revenge on him at all costs, so he returned early." "Your opponent is me?" The Supreme Will chuckled. The Void Emperor's face sank hearing this. He indeed had the intention to take revenge on Zhou Zhou, who asked him to turn the situation of the Ultimate Void battleground into such a state. Originally, he should have been the winner. He had lost all his advantages in the Ultimate Void battleground, causing him to have no choice but to confront the Supreme Will personally because of that common people's regal. His original plan was about to go bankrupt because of common people's regal. The outcome of that plan was the key to his future attainment of the eternal immortal realm. There was a high probability that he would not be able to get it. The more he thought about these things, the angrier he became. His killing intent towards the common people's regal became stronger. The Supreme Will's perception was also extremely high. He quickly sensed the Void Emperor's emotions. He frowned slightly, feeling puzzled. Even if the common people's regal took back all the Ultimate Void battleground regions that the other party had occupied, this Void Emperor shouldn't hate the common people's regal to such an extent, right? There was something strange about it. The Supreme Will was keenly aware of this. However, no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out the reason. There were too few clues after all. There was no time to think. The Void Emperor had already charged over by then. This guy knows one thing very well. That was, the victory of the war between they and the Supreme Will was actually in the hands of him and the Supreme Will. If the Supreme Will won, the victory of the war would belong to the Supreme Will. It was the same even if the Void Emperor won. As for the other Supreme Will states, the victory of the Supreme Gods and those below the Supreme God level did not actually matter much to the victory of the war. Therefore, he didn't waste any words or schemes. He directly charged forward. "Take care of yourself!" The Supreme Will instructed Lord of 10,000 Evils before heading forward. An extremely intense battle began as soon as the two collided. The Lord of 10,000 Evils widened his eyes and looked at the place where the two sides were fighting, but he realized that he couldn't see anything. He gritted his teeth indignantly. He had almost forgotten that experts with strong willpower had already completely transcended laws and willpower. The battle scene between they was something that existences below the supreme willpower realm could not see at all. They were like existences in a higher dimension. Low-dimensional creatures could not spy on the actions of such powerful beings. However, even though they couldn't be seen and couldn't help the supreme will, they could still deal with the other enemies. He looked into the distance. As the Void Emperor and the Supreme Will fought, the ultimate Void race under him also charged in the direction of him and the Supreme Army. Kill. The Lord of 10,000 Evils wasn't afraid at all. He immediately led the 1,000 Evils army and Supreme Army and flew towards the ultimate Void race's army. In the Crimson Great Cosmos, Zhou 15 had already led the top Scarlet Lords to the territory of the chaotic Scarlet Divine Kingdom. Following that, they did not stop and charged straight for the Divine Kingdom's divine capital. Along the way, they had encountered many soldiers from the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom who wanted to stop but they were easily eliminated by them. They were unable to stop they from advancing. The chaotic divine capital, Os, looked at the 5 scarlet chaos humans in front of him who were emitting the aura of supreme gods with excitement. He would never have thought that the Crimson Overlord, in order to reward him by establishing the beginner grade Master God tier kingdom, would directly bestow 5 wisps of scarlet origin power. It was these 5 wisps of scarlet origin power that allowed the 5 Master God tier advanced grade God spirits under him to directly advance to grade 1 Supreme God. Furthermore, with the enhancement of the scarlet origin power, even if they were to advance to the Supreme Will realm in the future, it would increase the chances of success by 3%. The 5 of them could be said to have a bright future. At the same time, Aus also tacitly acknowledged the 5 grade 1 Supreme Gods of them as the future ministers of his divine kingdom. With the worship of these 5 supreme gods, the flames of ambition in Aus's heart instantly soared. Furthermore, even the common people's regal, whose reputation had recently suppressed the various worlds, he had the idea of competing with him. Aus's face darkened thinking of the common people's regal. He recalled what the Crimson Overlord had said to him after bestowing him with the 5 wisps of scarlet origin energy. Even though your current achievements are not bad, you are still far from that common people's regal. You will never have the right to be proud in front of him. You're gonna keep going. I don't expect you to surpass the common people's regal, but don't be defeated by the other Scarlet Lords. Otherwise, it will show that my judgment is too poor. If that should happen, you'll have to bear the consequences. Common people's regal. Os gritted his teeth and said angrily, "The Crimson Overlord said that I can't surpass you, but I don't think so. One day, I will trample you under my feet and make you call me your king." Os could not forget the huge defeat his clone had suffered during the tribulation of the 10,000 races, when he met the common people's regal. In that battle, he had gathered the power of many Scarlet Lords, but they were still divided and defeated by that guy. He had also received severe punishment from the Crimson Overlord as the leader of that failed war. Since that incident, Aus was sensitive enough to realize that the Crimson Overlord, which had always been very satisfied with him, was starting to be disappointed in him. If it wasn't for that, if he could lead the Scarlet Lord and win the tribulation of 10,000 races, how could he not have been promoted to the 5th Reserve Army? He might have already become the official 5th Reserve Army of the Supreme Scarlet. Why would he need to compete with those weak and pitiful lords for this position? Common people's regal, it's all your fault! The more Aus thought about it, the more he hated common people's regal. However, at the same time, he subconsciously felt reverence and fear towards that fellow. Even he didn't sense such emotions, or rather, he vaguely sensed them, but he wasn't willing to face them, right at that moment. "Report!" A loud shout was heard, then a messenger quickly ran in from outside the hall. He knelt in front of Aus and said anxiously, "Reporting to your majesty. Just now, the city lord of Border City, Lord Frey, sent news that the king of the succubus divine kingdom, Noctul, had led the Scarlet Army of the Death Scarlet Divine Kingdom, the Devil Scarlet Divine Kingdom, the Shadow Scarlet Divine Kingdom, the Dark Scarlet Divine Kingdom, and a total of 25 other Scarlet Divine Kingdoms to attack. Currently, the territory north of the Divine Kingdom has completely fallen. Moreover, this allied Scarlet Army is charging towards our chaotic Scarlet God at an astonishing speed. General Frey has died on the battlefield. Ours was stunned. He did not even come back to his senses for a moment. He finally reacted and angrily said after a long while, "Be starred. That loser Noctul I spared he for the sake of the succubus God Lord. It's fine if he isn't grateful, but he actually dares to attack again. He even brought a group of weak lords and tried to overthrow this emperor's rule. Where did they get the guts to fight against a defeated opponent and a bunch of useless people? Turon." He looked at one of the 5 newly promoted supreme gods below. He wore blood-colored armor and carried an extremely long snow-white sword on his back. He wore a helmet, and only his scarlet eyes were exposed. "Your Majesty, I'm here," Turon said respectfully and coldly. "This emperor commands you to lead your master god-level army, the Scarlet Blood Army, to the enemy and destroy this arrogant and stupid fellow," Aus said coldly. "Yes, Your Majesty." Turon's voice was monotonous, but anyone could hear the intense killing intent in his words. After he received the order, he did not say anything else. He immediately stood up and left the shrine's main hall. "Your Majesty, don't worry. With Your Excellency Turon's help, those defeated opponents will not be able to return. Your Excellency Turon has just advanced to become a Grade 1 Supreme God. I was just worried that there was no place to do anything, but the other party took the initiative to come knocking on my door. It's really good. You guys are making my hands itch." The other 4 Supreme Gods chatted and laughed, completely disregarding the invasion of the Succubus Divine Kingdom and other Divine Kingdom factions. They were Supreme Gods, even if it was just a newly promoted Grade 1 Supreme God. It was not something that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could scam. A group of defeated generals from a Divine Kingdom Lord's faction was indeed not worthy of their attention. Except, while they were chatting happily, they did not notice Aus's thoughtful expression. Aus looked up and saw the 4 Supreme Gods conversing on their own. He did not find it strange. A Supreme God should have such confidence. However, after a moment of silence, he said, "Guru, Asra, Madzo Kondo. The 4 of you go help Turon too." As soon as he said that, the 4 Supreme Gods were stunned. "Your Majesty, why? Are you not confident in Your Excellency Turon's strength?" Matzo could not help but ask. Perhaps because he had become a Supreme God, he had become much bolder. In the past, he would never have dared to say such words to Aus, and Aus's heart sank. Matzo was becoming more and more unruly after he advanced to the Supreme God level. "He actually dared to question him?" he said expressionlessly. "Even though the Succubus God Lord is a little arrogant, the Divine Kingdom Lords that he brought are not all stupid. Since they dared to come under the leadership of a defeated opponent like Noctul, they must have some trump card to make they confident enough to attack. This emperor guesses that there's a high chance that it's also a Supreme God-level technique. That's why this emperor sent you guys along. Go. Didn't you say that your hands were itching? Then use the enemy in front of you to test your current methods." Os said, even though he was a little proud of being valued by the Crimson Overlord. This did not mean that he was rash. On the contrary, it was precisely because of the Crimson Overlord's favor that he felt that he had the hope of becoming the 5th Reserve Army of the Crimson Overlord. Therefore, he cherished everything in front of him even more. It also made him treat every choice more seriously. He didn't want to lose the great situation in front of him because of a moment of carelessness.